first major passion in life was actually rugby, and I played rugby for 25 years. When I moved to Singapore here, I started playing for the Singapore national seven-a-side rugby team. And it was a fantastic period of my life, going on rugby tours and playing in international tournaments, including the biggest seven-a-side rugby tournament in the world, the Hong Kong Sevens. And it was during the Hong Kong Sevens where I got hit in a very big tackle, and I heard my leg go pop, 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 and my ankle dislocated, and I broke my leg quite badly. And it was effectively the end of my rugby career. And for many months after this, I felt very depressed as I had operation after operation. It wasn't until about 6 months later that things really came to a head when the rest of my teammates flew down to Bali for a rugby tournament and I couldn't join them. And I felt very sorry for myself at this time. And I can still remember vividly on a Sunday morning when one of my friends, he called me up to tell me some devastating news that there had been a terrorist bomb in Bali and my teammates were in the location of this bomb and 8 of them had been killed. My first reaction was just complete shock, horror and disbelief. But also on a personal note for me, it was the last time that I ever felt sorry for myself.
Grant, welcome.
Yeah, hi, Ian, nice to be here.
I hear that you only just got back and you've been away on a 6-day training trip?
Yeah, so last week we took Simpson's Donkey, my ocean rowing boat, across to Indonesia for 6 days to test all the systems out for our upcoming expedition starting in January.
And how did it go?
Well, it was very intense and very hot. Had a few breakages, ran aground and had some close encounters with some container ships. But the whole purpose of it was to gain experience, and we got a lot of experience in 6 days, that's for sure.
I'll just take us back a little bit. Frame the challenge. What is it that you are undertaking next year?
I'm into long human-powered journeys, going thousands of kilometers using purely my own human power. So my next challenge is where I will attempt to travel from Singapore, where I've been living for the last 19 years, all the way back to New Zealand, which is my original home. It's a distance to be around about 12,000 kilometers. There is a row from Singapore through the archipelago of Indonesia to Darwin in Australia. There's a cycle ride for over 4,000 kilometers across Australia. And then there's a 2,600 kilometer stretch between Australia and New Zealand, which is a very gnarly, very rough part of the world. Today is a big day doing sponsorship commitments. So I've got 2 presentations today. The first one is at a Singapore Cricket Club. Another problem, especially between here and Bali, is shipping traffic. And this is an example of a very large vessel, and there's Simpson's Donkey, our little boat. To give you an idea of the vessel traffic, if I overlay the vessel paths for 1 year, you can see from Singapore down here all the way to Bali is just a mass of traffic.
And you have a partner for the first leg of the rowing?
Yeah, Charlie is a young, keen English chap. He's just going to join to Darwin.
I've got very similar ambitions to Grant of my own in the future. And when I was doing some homework for that, I spoke to a boat builder. He mentioned that I should speak to Grant, considering he's one of the only other people based in Singapore. Crazy enough to go and do this sort of thing. It's not the easiest thing for some people to understand, but for me it was quite an easy yes. It's just what a great way to try and test and see what you're actually physically and mentally made of.
So he's just going to join to Darwin, and the Tasman Sea I'm still sourcing for a partner.
I have some recollection of some tragedy in that water with professional yachtsmen at some stage.
It was the Sydney to Hobart yacht race, which happens every year. And there was a big storm there a number of years ago, and there are a number of people who lost their lives in that. But on a fairly regular basis, the Tasman Sea claims lives. It's just very rough, and it's been crossed only a handful of times by rowing boats compared to the Atlantic, which around 500 people have crossed. So it's not a very popular thing to row across, and one of the issues is that it's quite dangerous.
The hard part of the Tasman is its unpredictability. And it can be a very nasty bit of water. A lot of currents that are going around in circles, and they're not charted, they're not predictable, they come and they go.
The Tasman sort of has two moods. One's either it's calm and you're rowing for 24 hours a day, and the other is it's stormy and you're holding on for dear life.
There's been a lot of people tried it. A lot of them have usually ended in the first week or two. I mean, people have kayaked much greater bodies of water than the Tasman, but this one hasn't been done, and the reason for that is it's a tricky piece of water. He left from Tasmania and basically got to within a few k's of Fiordland when things turned to tragedy there, which was really sad.
How do you rationalise the risk? You're a father, you're a husband, you're probably entering the riskiest adventure that you have been on.
This is a very sensitive topic. The word selfish, the word foolhardy and things like this are bandied around.
First of all, a massive thank you to my wife, Stephanie. You know, the hardest job for anything with these expeditions is definitely for the people you leave behind at home. And I feel tremendously guilty for what I'm doing, and I feel tremendously privileged that I have the support of the ladies back at home, all of them, and I don't take that lightly, and it really gives a lot more responsibility and pressure to make sure we do this safely and do it in good style. So thank you very much, ladies.
To be honest, as the day gets closer, it gets more and more difficult because I have so many people coming up to me and asking me, why do you let your husband do such a crazy thing? And do you even think that he could die? And that really hurts me because, of course, I think of all these things. Of course, I think that something might happen to him during the expedition. But at the same time, I don't think I can live with myself if I were to live the next 40 years with him, letting him think, what if he's done it?
But I'm not a thrill seeker. I'm not a person who wants to jump off a high building with a parachute attached to their back. I would say that my wife is probably one of the few people who actually gets to see how much work we put into these expeditions. We have backup for every single important system on board, 2 sat phones, 2 water makers. We've got 2 guys on board. We've done sea survival courses, first aid at sea courses. So we've done an enormous amount of preparation to minimize the risks. That's how I rationalize it. If I thought I was going to die, I wouldn't be going out there at all. After the bombing in Bali and I got over the initial shock, it made me realize that I've been very lucky, and now I still had my health and I had opportunity to experience and search for other passions in life. So I started climbing around the world and going on different expeditions, and I climbed for about 9 years until I focused my sights on Mount Everest. In 2011, I finally got everything together. However, very early on in the expedition, I got hit by a very severe attack of high-altitude pulmonary edema, and I was basically choking to death. It was a very scary, very terrifying experience to go through. I was very lucky to descend and get off the mountain alive, but I was so passionate about Mount Everest that it seemed to me that it would be a question mark for the rest of my life if I did not go back and try it again. So the great thing about having a second attempt at something in life after you've failed is that you can learn from your mistakes and you can change a lot of the things that you did wrong the first time. So I really made a massive amount of changes on my second expedition. And this time I was much stronger, much more experienced, and I was really proud to reach the summit at the end of May 2012.
Here I am on the summit of Everest, 8 minutes past 7 Nepali time, and this is the view from up here. I want to say hi, Stephanie, I love you. Hi, Mum and Dad.
All rowing trips, the dangerous bit is the start and the end, the departure and the landing, because you've got hard stuff there like rocks and beaches and stuff like that.
I remember just before I left, I went for a walk up on top of Muttonbird Island, which is at the entrance to Coffs Harbour, and you look out and there's a small gap between the break wall and Muttonbird Island, and you think, holy moly, it's just going to be me and the sea very soon, and it's just the battle's going to begin of boat and man versus the Tasman. Good luck, lads. Good luck to you. The honest truth is the day that I left from Coffs Harbour was intimidating, but it was flat. so I was really lucky. I had an offshore wind blowing me straight towards New Zealand. Then I went for it, and that was really what helped me get almost into the middle of the Tasman Sea within 10 days.
About 24 hours before, everything sort of came in line. I talked to the local fishermen again and they said, yeah, that's looking good. Right, press the button, we go. I certainly didn't have any feelings or fears. It was more, thank God we can get on with it after 5 months of bloody hard work. Let's get on with it. That was it. Then no thoughts of doing anything else but head west.
Go ahead, Simpson's Donkey.
Wince fish, this is Simpson's Donkey. We're now in a position across the shipping channel. So we're just going to turn on our radar reflector, then I'm going to monitor the AIS to try and pick an opening.
So here we are, just south of Singapore, and we're about to cross the straits. It's 1.7 nautical miles to cross over the shipping lanes. Second busiest port in the world. Obviously, the quicker we are to safety.
It's a very busy area, as you can see by all the icons on the map here. And like playing a game of Frogger, just when there's a gap, just go for it. Go ahead, Simpson's Donkey.
Which fish, this is Simpson's Donkey. Simpson's Donkey, we are officially over and clear of the shipping channel. Thank you very much for your support. It's been greatly appreciated. May you have a very safe journey back, and we will see you at some stage in the future.
Sun's just going down and I'm about to begin the first 2-hour shift of the evening. So I'm going to just show you the view. And as you can see, apart from a few scratches of land over there, everything is blue. Feeling really positive, feeling really well. Me and Grant are getting along really, really good as well. It's finally setting a rhythm. Everything becomes a lot more simpler in the best possible way.
Hello? Grant, how do you hear me?
Yeah, Dave, I can hear you. How are you?
Very good, mate. Yourself?
Very hot. It's sucking our energy out, basically. So just trying to row very slowly and keep the pace moving and trying to stay cool out of the shade on the off shifts.
I think my biggest fear in rowing the Tasman was fear of failure. So I'm not sure what it would have taken for me to turn around. There's nights when the sky is just incredibly beautiful and the sunsets are amazing and you feel a massive sense of gratitude that you've been given the opportunity to take on a challenge. And then there's days where it's wet and cold and miserable and you don't know how you're going to get through the night. So you live in a constant status of stress and anxiety of what's going to happen next and how to deal with the next problem. And you just try to survive that level of anxiety.
There's times when you get very tired, cold, hungry, whatever. If you had a few days where you haven't slept for about 3 days, then the tendency to become depressed is very strong. And the way I dealt with it was I used to scream and shout, and that sort of got it out in the system. You know, I'd swear at the birds, the boat, the oars, the Tasman. Yeah, you're down. But what's the easiest way to get out of this problem? And there was only one answer to that, and that's row to Australia. So that was the resolution. Row, you bastard, row. And that's what I said to myself. It was written on the boat.
Day 23, and it's blowing hard, but we're still making progress. So if the wind is behind us, we don't care if it rains.
Well, it's 7:15 on day 24, and it's absolutely bucketing it down outside. We're just flying through the water though, almost out of control. It's a little bit scary. Only 56 miles off the coast of Bali, but it looks like the hardest 56 miles of our lives. But there is not an option of missing Bali. It's where we exit the immigration and customs. It's where we pick up our food resupplies. The consequences of missing Bali are really quite devastating. It's 6 o'clock in the morning, day 26. It's been another shit night. But we had no choice, you just have to keep pushing through. And thankfully, around about 2 or 3 o'clock this morning, it seemed to break out of that northeasterly current. Seems like there's a chance again. This really is a massive adventure. There is no guarantee of success.
I can see Bali! Woo!
I have never been so happy to see land in all my life. Okay, we know the game's not over yet. If we have to crash land in Bali, we will. 15 miles off the north coast, still 35 miles away from Amet Bay, but it's looking positive after a terrible night.
We started really feeling the strength of Mother Nature, and I can't think of a more humbling experience to date for me about how insignificant we truly are out in the elements and out there on your own.
Day 26, and welcome sight from Bali. First fisherman. What's he doing out here? I'm really envious of his engine.
The engine is the future, I'm convinced of that.
You heard it here first.
It's really easy to be strong and confident on land, but when When you're in that kind of environment, you're stripped of your ego. There's no one watching. It's self versus self. How strong is your desire, and how much can you take and keep moving forward?
I would say it was an exercise in misery because everything is wet. You get into that rowing position, you row for 2 hours, you're completely wet through. You get into the cabin, the whole cabin is wet through. You start to get salt sores all over your body, all over your arms. You crave some sunshine, you crave to be clean, and it just grinds you down. It's a miserable existence.
You're rowing most of the time, but sometimes there's no point. Sometimes you can be rowing as hard as you can and you'll still be going backwards, so you need to point the boat in the right direction and row as long and as hard as you can, but that's actually a very small component of getting across the sea. The Tasman definitely decides, the weather decides. You could be the best rower in the world, the toughest guy, the strongest person in the world, and the weather could be blowing you straight back to Australia. There'd be nothing you can do about it.
Anyone can do it. Anyone can attempt to do it, but it's absolutely dependent on the weather and the sea. You can plan everything and look at all the charts and all the weather, but ultimately the sea decides whether they're going to allow you to trespass, allow you to cross or not.
And we are now departing Bali. And there's Charlie working away on the first shift. Let's see what the current's doing. Hopefully we dodge all the ships. And 25 days to Darwin. Let's see if we can do it. Let's go. 3 miles out. Here's the first ship we're encountering. Massive ships are coming up and through the Lombok Strait every few minutes. In 10 minutes' time, it's going to be exactly 1 mile off our bow. So Charlie's been working really hard to get out of its way. Charlie, do you have a visual on that ship?
Yeah, I've got it.
It's a massive ship. It would be very difficult for the ship to turn.
Trying to turn east to give it a nice wide berth.
So there is this ship. She's passing 1 nautical mile to our stern.
Which is as close as you possibly want to be to a vessel of that size. So it's day 45 and I'm feeling fantastic. Just being out in a place like this is breathtaking.
The key is 50 nautical miles a day to try and get to Darwin in 25 days. The trick is to find where the best current stream is. I call it the conveyor belt. We want to get on that conveyor belt and ride it along east for the next 10 days.
We're 15 miles off the coast of Flores and they're friendly fishermen.
I think they're very lucky to catch us up actually because we're going so fast at the moment.
Day 46 and it's going to be a hot one. It's not even 11 o'clock yet and it's scorching.
Grant, how are you? It's 41 degrees. That was at 10:30 in the morning, so we're a little bit scared of how hot it's going to get.
Well, it's just going to be colder in the Tasman.
That's right. It's a lovely tour.
Day 48. You can't go out in the direct sunlight. You can literally feel your skin burning.
Day 51, we have hit a horrible countercurrent. We're trying to go in that direction east, and currently it's pushing us backwards. That compounded with the fact that it's brutally hot, rowing is absolute torture. But we came here to row a boat from Singapore to Darwin, and we will do whatever we need to get it there.
Hey Dave, how are you going, mate?
Not too bad. I see you guys have had a bit of a rough night of it.
Yeah, as soon as we hit north of the sea lat yesterday, it started going all swirly and like we're going through whirlpools every 5 minutes. So it's not much fun, mate.
Progress is so slow. We've dropped off the conveyor belt of currents that we wanted to be on. At this rate, it'll take us 50 or 60 days to get to Darwin, and we don't have that much food. Conditions need to change.
There is an eddy, but it's supposed to be a good 30 miles south of you.
30 miles?
Yeah, I know. That's what I was pushing you up over the top of, but maybe we didn't go far enough north.
Well, it's 7 o'clock in the morning, and we've had about 90 minutes sleep in the last 24 hours. When we were rowing solo, I made 400 meters in 90 minutes. when we changed over, the boat started pointing the opposite direction and ran away, and we lost 200 of those meters.
The stuff I'm looking at still says that the current should be favourable, but...
Yeah, definitely wrong, I can tell you that.
Heartbreaking stuff at the moment. We just can't fight it, and we've run out of energy. Both exhausted. Need to rest.
It doesn't look like this, we're going to be able to get across here at this stage, unless something changes.
So, it's day 53. Yesterday and the day before were two of the hardest days of the expedition so far because we had unexpected countercurrents. And as we were trying and rowing in one oar to turn the boat around to the correct direction, we noticed that if we headed in a southwesterly direction, we were doing about 2.5, 2.7 knots. So that is the direction of Dili in East Timor. That got us thinking about a change in strategy. Instead of trying to headbutt our way through this brick wall of countercurrents, should we change strategy and try and drop down to Dili, have a rest, and then reassess in the strategy to get across the Timor Sea? Charlie? Yes, mate. Let's get ready to leave in about 15 minutes' time. Okay, sounds good. So we're going to need, because the current's pushing against us, we're going to need to head at a bearing of about 140 degrees, and the current should push us west towards Dili. So the coordinate is 8 degrees, 32.7, 125 degrees, 33.8. And if you call that the Dili approach.
This was the second time when I began to question the future of the expedition, because we could not go forward any further. We were stuck. We ran into a brick wall.
We describe it as a decision, but really it's a decision made for us. That coupled with the currents, it just shows you how much nature has a role in what way we go.
I remember the last 4 days there was a huge storm brewing, and I was getting blown 12.5 miles north for every half mile I was making towards New Zealand. And I remember Clouds, my weatherman, sending me a text message saying, "We'll see you in Fiji."
There was clues. I'd seen an aircraft flying fairly low, so that was going into an airport somewhere. But the biggie was the first light, which was the Moreton Bay lighthouse. So it was getting dark, and I didn't really know what was on the shore. I knew that it was a combination of rocks and beach, but I decided to go for it. I was going to go in there as hard as I could because I'd run out of energy, basically.
Well, we're about to depart Dili, and we're going to head off towards Darwin. I can't believe it, to be honest, that we're here. We've come all the way from Singapore, and we've just got to finish off this last part. Farewell!
Then I began to hear surf, but I didn't know whether it was beach or rocks or whatever. The first wave hit the boat, and it turned the boat sideways. So I jumped into the sea and let the boat tow me in.
So the waves started getting steeper, so I rode the boat onto a wave, threw the oars overboard, and then I started swimming. And actually it was quite funny because all the crowd on the beach was watching the boat, and everyone was walking towards the boat, and then this skinny little man arrived about 500 metres up the beach. That was me, and there was no one there.
It's day 69, and goodbye Southeast Asia.
We are heading towards Darwin.
And then the boat was on the beach, and it was sand. It wasn't rock, it wasn't cliff, it was sand. And this was Noosa Beach, Marcus Beach in Noosa. And one's instinct is to jump up and down like a little kid does when they're excited. But I couldn't, and I fell over. So I'm falling around in the sand, laughing and crying. It's dark, and just, hey, I've bloody made it.
It's day 70, and things are not going that well, to be honest. We're crossing Cyclone Alley now in the Tasman Sea, and Cyclone Alley is the place where all the cyclones come through. So speed is safety here, and you see our speed is only about half a knot. So I've been pretty depressed the last couple of days. 190 miles at half a knot. That's 16, 17 days of rowing to get across a small stretch of water with a lot of dangerous cyclones. But I'm kind of stopped worrying about the situation. I've already resigned myself as well that if a cyclone does come, because we're moving so slowly, then the only safe option is to flag down the closest ship. No amount of willpower from us tiny little human beings will allow us to defeat Mother Nature. And in the early hours of this morning, I made up my mind that I have to stop being depressed about this situation because I can't control it. And I stopped thinking about the speed. I stopped thinking about what time we're going to get to Darwin, if we're going to get to Darwin at all. And I just try and enjoy it. So I feel a lot better inside my head. I'm just focusing on the experience, enjoying being out here. And if we get there, we get there. If we do get to Darwin, then I guess the adventure will continue. Who knows? There is no such thing as adventure without risk. There is no such thing as adventure without uncertainty. So let's see how it goes.
Copy that, Australian Coast Guard. Good to hear from you. Over.
No drama, sir. Wish you some nice weather conditions the next few days so you can make your way onto Darwin. Welcome to Australia. Take care. We'll see you probably tomorrow.
75 days after departing Singapore.
Woohoo! That's pretty cool.
The guys are now less than 100 miles from Darwin Harbour, so we're leaving port and then we'll guide them to the harbour entrance. Oh, I think it's terribly awesome. I'm just overwhelmed by their capacity to manage such a human feat.
Nautilus, this is Simpson's Donkey, go ahead.
Oh, good morning guys and welcome to Australia and congratulations.
Thank you very much. We're currently 9.5 miles from Cullen Bay Marina and really working hard to try and get there on this next tidal cycle. Over. Is there some starboard marker we should be heading for to head in, or do you have any advice when we should start heading directly towards Cullen? Over.
We have John Punch and his beautiful yacht Nautilus there, who's guiding us in, and he's going to give us the nod shortly. But there's something else I'd like to say now, and that's a massive thank you to this man down here, Mr. Charlie Smith, because this is the last half a mile for him of the Rowing from Home to Home expedition. It's been a long journey together, so I really appreciate your energy, your enthusiasm, and your commitment being part of the team. Your spirit will live on with the team.
Cheers, mate.
All the best for your own adventures in the future.
Mate, and also for your onward journey.
Unfortunately, this is the end of my stage of the expedition, but of the chapter we've written, I'm really happy with what's come out. I'm shell-shocked to even think that we've managed to row that far. And it's quite mad to look at the vastness of an aquatic wilderness and then just realise that you've managed to pass through that. But what it's really taught me is that I really want to encourage people to have their own adventures and to go out and see the world through their own eyes and to explore it. I can't put into words how much you get out of life if you just say yes to it.
It was an absolutely surreal moment taking Simpson's donkey out of the water, because I just kept thinking she'd been 4,200 kilometers on this journey which no one else had ever done. And I know for Charlie it was quite sad for him because it was the end of the expedition for him. For me, it was the start of stage 2. It was tremendously exciting because I could now get on my bike and have this fantastic adventure riding across Australia.
Well, good morning, day one. I just left Darwin. It's just lovely to be out here. I'm so excited to get into the interior of Australia, into the outback by myself. Experience some solitude.
I call cycle touring absolute freedom. When you're in the boat, you're extremely limited to what Mother Nature throws at you. If she blows the wind in a certain direction, you'll go in that direction. Whereas when I'm on the bike, I choose how fast I want to go. I choose what direction I want to go in. I choose when I want to stop, where I want to eat, where I want to sleep. And I just found the intensity of the experience, being by myself, being alone, looking after myself. Life was completely within my own hands, and I enjoyed the experience. It was so much more of a richer experience for me being by myself.
Hello, it's day 5. Early start this morning, left at 6:30. Met some really friendly people today. Ex-Kiwi gave me a can of Coke, and the stop and go man just back there stopped and had a 5-minute chat to him. Really friendly people. Kiwis are great, Aussies are great. All I can say is that life is bloody great. Well, I've done 60 Ks and it's coming up. Darkness is soon going to be on me on day 11. Thank God the temperature has dropped. I feel really disgusting at the moment. I feel dirty. I haven't had a shower for 2 days. I've been so hot and sweaty today. I'm covered in insect bites, and I really am struggling with the heat during the day up here. But I guess sunsets like this make up for it. Well, I'm 11 days cycling from Coffs Harbour now, and it's really making me think. Once again, I'm caught between two worlds. One is being out here and absolutely loving it. The adventure, the challenge, the struggle, the remoteness, the isolation, the good days, the bad days, the cold, the heat, the flies. That's why I do this stuff, because I love it. I feel unbelievably alive and fulfilled out here. And then on the other hand, there's my family, my wife and my kids, Stephanie, Kate and Rachel, back home, who I miss with an intensity that it actually hurts. So it's a contrast, and it can be quite confusing at times to understand what you want.
This is a happy but sad moment because I spent my last night in the tent and, yeah, feeling a bit reflective. It's done a very good job, and now it's over. Now it's all a memory. The last few days, the main thing on my mind has been whether to tackle the Tasman solo or whether to tackle it with a partner in the boat. I have a couple of options for good, solid, reliable people who would be good partners for the Tasman. So this isn't a case of I don't have any rowing partners, so I need to go and do it alone. I've actually got two really world-class options. But on the same token, I'm also wondering what kind of experience do I want on the Tasman? Getting to Darwin in the boat, there were so many fishing boats around. That had always pushed me towards wanting to have a second rower to keep the boat moving 24 hours a day. But, you know, there is much, much less shipping traffic in the Tasman Sea, and you're much more at the mercy of the winds. It's more a case of a personal decision about how I want to finish this expedition.
First sight of the Tasman, first sight of Coffs Harbour. Oh, I can't believe it. 8,000 kilometres since leaving Singapore. I've arrived at the east coast of Australia, and somewhere way out there, 2,500 kilometres away, is New Zealand. Woohoo!
I was close enough to see Mount Taranaki, which was pretty exciting, but I was running out of food and pretty much all my safety gear was shot. Everything was had it. And then all of a sudden I was in a once in 40-year storm that had taken roofs off houses in Auckland. The storm didn't look like it was giving up, and one day later I was going to be out of range of air pickup as well. I try to keep emotion out of safety decisions, and it was only when I was sort of halfway up the rope, that's when I sort of took another look at the mountain and went, shit, I can swim there.
It's a tough little piece of ocean. If you're rowing, a fast trip would be 30 or something days and a slow trip would be 60 or 90 days. Over that period of time, at some stage in that traversing, you're going to get the shit kicked out of you. You cannot escape it over that period of time without getting something nasty.
The weather moves through the Tasman quite regularly, which ends up giving you the wave action from the current wind, but you also quite often get the wave action from the last 3 days of wind as well. So you've got wave action this way, chop action this way, and current that way. And so you're constantly calculating to try and find that current so you can mitigate what the wind does. But in that current, there's no sign on it saying, here I am. Because if you get that current wrong, then you go to sleep and you wake up 10, 15 miles behind where you started paddling that day.
You know, for him now, all he has to think about is this moment and then the next. That's why sailors love going to sea, because once they cast the ropes, nothing else matters. Which brings me to the other thing, that one guy we didn't talk about was Andrew McCauley, the Australian, who set off from Tasmania in his kayak, got in sight of the Southern Alps of New Zealand. Something happened, we don't know what, and he is never seen again. And you know, that is the reality of this kind of challenge. You know, Grant, he'll be fine. I really believe he'll be fine. You know, he's prepared incredibly well. As I say that, you know, I'm thinking of Andrew McCauley.
Well, I've just left the marina. I can't believe I'm finally out here and got started. I miss Stephanie and the girls like hell. Am I questioning what I'm doing? Not at all. It's just an unbelievable moment. It's 6 o'clock in the morning on day number 2. I've made it through the night. Woo! The wind has dropped down completely. The sea's gone very, very flat. It feels very, very peaceful. But it really is that saying, the calm before the storm, because a massive 30 knot southerly is going to hit us in about 3 hours. So trying to get set up while I'm here. Well, this is my absolute worst case scenario. It's day 2, it's 9:45 at night. There's a storm coming through. The boat is on power anchor, so I can't move. There's a ship coming directly towards us. I request you take evasive action to avoid me. Over. So I just managed to get hold of this massive 220 metre long container vessel, and they've confirmed that they can see me on their AIS. So relieved. Day 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, and the winds have turned. This is make or break time. See what we can do. It's time to get rowing.
Grant, good morning, how are you?
Good here, life is okay here. Wind's dropped down to about 7 or 8 knots. So clouds has given me a waypoint which we need to hit, which is 35.5 degrees south and 154 degrees east.
Very good. Roger.
Just see how the next 12 hours go. If you feel you need to talk, feel free, obviously, to call me at any time.
Okay, speak tomorrow.
Made 80 miles progress in the last 24 hours, which is fantastic distance. Just spoke to Clouds. He said I've got to make the most of today because tonight the wind's going to turn round. G'day Dave, here, I can hear you loud and clear. According to Clouds, they're going to be hit by about 48 hours of not very good weather. I'm currently 60 nautical miles away
from the sweet spot where I can start turning east.
So clouds has given me a waypoint which we need to hit, and we're bang on target. But once we get there, this next instruction is I have to make some easting progress. So that's basically the plan.
The sea state's getting worse and worse on day 9. We had a partial capsize. It ripped the whole flagpole off the boat, blew the buckets away, the life raft almost floated away.
Your equipment damages, anything broken and not working?
Everything still appears to be working, so yeah, it could have been a bit worse. I can't work out why the power anchor's not pulling us into the wind.
I've just been lying here getting smashed. I learned a new respect for the sea today. One wave. One wave is all it took to almost flip this boat right over.
But I guess realistically the conditions will get worse. How do you feel about that, over?
Well, it depends if the power anchor can hold me into the wind or not, because if it doesn't, then it's useless.
Our biggest testing is coming up tonight and tomorrow night. 35 knots of wind. I'm pretty nervous about it, but at the same time, it's an opportunity finally to break free of the position that I'm in. So I'm just praying that I can use this opportunity to get away and the seas won't be too rough. Well, if it's time alone you want, then rowing the Tasman has certainly got all of that. I just feel completely alone out here. And sometimes that's a beautiful feeling, and sometimes it's pretty scary. I don't really think that rowing the Tasman solo is going to become a mass participation sport.
Rowing the Tasman, it's been the hardest thing I'll ever do, I'd say. I've never been more broken, I've never been more down and out. I've never felt that something was so impossible and you have no choice but to continue.
Most frustrating, I can't find the East Australia current. Where is it?
Grant will be going through all sorts of hell at the moment. He'll feel broken and beaten, and all you've got is your boat and the oars, and you do everything you can to fight it. And it seems to do everything it can to fight you as well.
Rode my guts out yesterday for 9 hours to try and find this current.
And there's just this complete feeling of lack of control when you're in that environment. There's nothing you can do. You can't beat the weather, you can't beat the Tasman. It doesn't matter how hard you row in whatever direction, you'll just get pushed to wherever it wants you to go.
I had the power anchor out. I've pulled it in 3 times. I've tried rowing. Rowed for 3 hours. I've just tried the boat drifting. And nothing's working really well.
And you just have to hold on. You get thrown everywhere, you get wet, you get beaten up, and you get pushed backwards, and everything you want to do you can't because it's just an unpredictable, violent mess. And generally, the worst part about it is that's where you live. You've got wet feet, you've got wet everything, and you're just wanting to get home, or you're wanting to get to New Zealand as hard, as quickly as possible.
Day 13. 8:30 in the morning. What a horrible night.
boat was being dragged all over the place, thumping and banging. Pulled in the power anchor to see if I could start making some easterly progress. And as I pulled in the power anchor, I noticed that the line on the power anchor had chafed and it had almost broken. And it's the line which comes from the bow, and I can't access the bow from this boat unless I swim.
Yeah, the problem, Gabe, is the attachment to the bow. I have to get out of the boat and swim in the water to get to the bow for attention. That's the whole issue.
The bow of the boat was bang, bang, smacking up out of the water and almost hit me in the head. I managed to clip it in, but not to exactly the right spot, so tonight we have over 40 knots of wind coming in. We just have to pray that it's going to hold. So all in all, it's a shit day. Stormy f***ing seas, power anchor's broken, main set phone's f***ing broken, I've cut my finger. I have blue bottle stings all over me. When I went for that last swim then, a big wave come and threw me away from the boat. If I hadn't been clipped on, I would have lost the boat. Going in the wrong direction, and I really have had enough. There's about 3 days of 25 to 30 knots of wind have done to the sea. And look, the damage here, big wave.
I can hear you.
Yeah, it was a pretty rough night. Things are breaking left, right and centre. The main SATCOM system is down. The power anchor attachment broke again, and I had the cable backed up on a cleat on deck, and it ripped the cleat completely out and part of the deck out as well. So yeah, life is pretty miserable.
Mate, you've done bloody well. It's a great relief hearing that you're okay. How are you feeling, over?
I feel at the moment like day 14, 9 o'clock in the morning. Sat phone won't work, so I can't call Roger Batham. Wind's blowing 25, 30 knots, and 9:30 last night the boat capsized. Basically, I've got stuck in a current sending me north, and I'm only 160 miles off the coast of Australia. Now, I wanted to be 160 miles off Australia on day 3. So I've been thinking, should I try and head for Lord Howe Island and stop in there, fix up the issues with the boat. Part of me thinks that if I do go into Lord Howe Island, then I'll never get back in this boat again. Still got no idea how I'm going to get out of this mess that I'm in at the moment. I'm in a north-setting current stream taking me away from New Zealand. The wind over the next 4 or 5 days comes from every conceivable angle. So, I think I'm pretty screwed, to be honest. So sick of being in the cabin. So sick of going the wrong direction. So sick of just being blown around, not even doing any rowing. I know in a few weeks, in a few months, in a few years, I'll never be able to remember how miserable, how depressing, how demoralizing, how lonely it is being stuck in this tiny little cabin. I keep thinking back to what I did yesterday, swimming in these stormy seas, swimming out to the bow with the bow boom, 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 coming and landing so close to my head. It'd only take one bang on my head from that bow to knock me out. It'll be all over. Dave Field's been trying to cheer me up with messages, but a huge part of me just wants to go home, go back to Singapore, be with the family, be back to normal life again. So, enough's enough.
Marine Rescue. This is Simpson's Donkey, over. Simpson's Donkey, this is Marine Rescue, Cape Byron, Channel 16.
This is Simpson's Donkey, I read you loud and clear. Thank you for making contact. This is no emergency. I just wanted to speak about possibly getting a tow in to Ballina later on.
I'm not familiar with the approach to the marina or the port, and I understand there is a bar with breaking surf.
I talk to him?
Yes, I would appreciate the boat out here or a tow in at least the last 2 or 3 miles, over.
Simpson's Donkey, Marine Rescue Balma. Our vessel should be with you before 12 o'clock, and they will tow you to a mooring within the Richmond River. Over.
This is Simpson's Donkey. That's very good news. When you're coming out to see me, I will attach a red laser flare to my mast to make us more visible, over.
Romeo, the bar is starting to settle down a little bit, but I'll keep in contact with you, and I'll give you a call in about 30 minutes' time. Over.
Okay, roger that. Thank you very much. I'll start getting the boat prepared for a tow. Over.
Balma clear.
Compared to the first stage from Singapore to Darwin, where the biggest wind we had was 20-25 knots for 2 or 3 days only, that was nothing compared to what it was like out in the Tasman. That's just a standard day, you know. It just feels cruel. If I was going to use one word for the Tasman, I'd say it's cruel. The waves, they just keep coming. They're endless. They're like bullies. I'd peer out the back of the boat in the dark at night time, and I'll see the waves and see the darkness, and I just could not believe the position that I was in. 250 miles offshore, 4,500 meters of water depth, cold water, sharks, violent seas. I asked myself the question a number of times, what the hell am I doing here, you know? So the question is, am I prepared to go through all this again? I'm not normally prone to giving up when I fail at things, and part of that scares me, you know? Part of me wishes that I could just come back to shore now. I bury this and say, I gave it my best shot. Sell that boat, go back and see my kids who I love and miss, and just be happy. If I keep pushing my boundaries like I'm doing at the moment, I'm going to die. I know that without a doubt.
One of the reasons I rode the Tasman was setting an example for young people to get out there and challenge and dare and do all those sort of things. The other one is selfish. I set out to see whether I could do it, and I did it.
I think it's important that people once or twice in their lives get an ultimate focus to achieve something. Tasman was that for me, and just an unreasonable commitment to wanting to do something, I suppose.
I worked out there was no reason why it shouldn't be done. There was no reason why it wasn't achievable. What I didn't know was me, whether I could achieve it. It was a challenge, and it was one I wanted to take on.
After I'd done the trip, the Governor-General said something to me. He said, Sean, your expedition lit a candle for so many people. And I thought about it for a while, and then it occurred to me the importance of expeditions and challenging and taking on adventures is that other people look at it and then they sit back and they think, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to be better? How am I going to take on a challenge of my own and push myself to inspire others?
After a couple of months, the best thing was that I was able to go to the schools. I spoke to something like 7,000 school kids, telling the story, which was get out there and do something, go challenge yourself. Look, you can do it, it can be done. And that in itself made the trip worthwhile.
And it's this cycle of inspiration, I suppose, that you're able to start by being an adventurer and leading and showing people that these things are possible. And because you completed something, they think they can take on a challenge or push through their own emotional challenges, whatever it might be, but you do become an inspiration, and that's what's so awesome is, you know, there's drag-on effect and you bring a whole lot of people with you.
Darcy and Goran with Husqvarna, New Zealand's largest range of outdoor power equipment, Radio Sport.
We're lucky enough to be joined in the studio on a number of different levels. I'll go through that lately by Grant Rawlinson. You would have heard about his escapades on our program over the last couple of years. Grant, great to have you up here. How's life treating you, mate? Are you okay? It's been a long time.
Yeah, thanks. Very nice to be here, Darcy. Actually, the last time we talked was
You
when I was...
just come back from the ill-fated last trip from Coffs Harbour. That was the last time we spoke, so what's happened since then?
Right, yeah, so that was 24 days out at sea, and the winds were all coming from the wrong direction, so I ended up washed back into the shores of Australia, further away from New Zealand than where I started. When I came back from the first attempt, I was keen to get back out there pretty quickly, but it's all completely dependent on the weather. You can't row a boat against the wind anywhere you are in the Tasman because the winds are so strong. So you've got to try and pick where those winds are favourable as possible. So we came up with a plan for a few months later to make a second attempt, and I dropped down to a place called Eden, as close as possible to the 40-degree latitude line, the roaring 40s. And so 2 months ago, I made a quiet departure, and basically over the next 4 days, I got hammered.
It's 4 o'clock in the morning on day 3, and we just capsized pretty violently. I'm a bit banged and bruised up, but we're flying towards New Zealand. It's now 8 o'clock on the morning of day 3. It's not been a good night. We just had our second major capsize, and then we capsized again. 3 capsizes in the space of about 4 hours. What a horrible day. You see the cabin here is just upside down. Cabling's been torn off the roof. But even more interesting is the back deck. That there is the big bolt at the bow of the boat, which as you can see is completely snapped. So there is no power anchor attachment.
Also, the tiller arm for the rudder has snapped off completely.
Roger, understood. So is it worth trying to row to see whether you can go anywhere?
I have no rudder. I have no rudder at all. It's pointless trying to row.
This was day 3 of what was going to be a 60-day voyage on one of the roughest routes on the planet. And the decision was very quick that I had to abort.
Mixed emotions in the fact that you've been saved because you're in a very dicey situation, but you hadn't managed to get through again with a different route.
It's impossible to really explain. You know, when you're picked up in a helicopter off a boat, you lose your boat. You literally are picked up by a rescue swimmer on a winch, and you take what you're wearing, which is a survival suit, and your passport. So $150,000 boat, you know, 7 years of work is all gone out the window. So as I waved goodbye to the boat as we flew back into shore, it was all over. The expedition was all over. I mean, money for me is just an object which can be made or lost, and you can't die with it. So the money was not the issue at all. It's really the amount of work and the family sitting behind you, backing you for so long. So, yeah, I felt pretty bad time after that. But 3 days later, something amazing happened. The boat got stuck in a big eddy. And it just so happened that the wind as well turned in a favorable direction, and she got washed back within 50 kilometers of the mainland of Australia. When the local people from Eden went out and lassoed the donkey and towed her back into shore and saved her. So you've never seen an unhappier woman than my wife when I told her the great news.
Wow, 3 days later, the sea gave it back.
So I went from this feeling of despair and everything was all over to like, hold on, maybe there's possibility of another chance here. So then re-strategized again. I knew before the third attempt that The Simpson's donkey, she's a beautiful rowing boat, but she can be a bit difficult to control, especially when the sea state starts picking up. So on the third attempt, I thought we have to control this boat. So I thought by having a second rower, we can always have someone on the deck 24 hours a day, always steering her, always have her lined up with the breaking waves as they're coming in. So got a really solid teammate, Luke Richmond, a guy from Australia. He'd rowed across the Atlantic previously, and have another crack 2 months later. So, you know, we departed from Eden again, the two of us, and we got out there, and on day 3, Luke really started to realize that the Tasman Sea was a completely different part of the world than the Atlantic.
What's your thoughts on the Tasman so far, Luke?
Oh, mate, this is angry.
This is just angry.
You know, even on day 3, he said the sea state here is 3 times as worse than it ever was on 58 days of being on the Atlantic.
When we're on the Atlantic, I guess it's very predictable. The trade winds and currents are, you know, they're set in stone, they're famous. And once we're on those bad boys, we had very little bad weather. We used to have day in, day out of good continuous rowing. But this is what we're doing out here is really dealing with the ocean and everything she's got to throw at you.
That was in the morning of day 3 before it started to get really rough, and about 4 or 5 hours later it was blowing 35 knots. Waves were really coming in to break behind the boat. We were being surfed along again at 15, 16 knots when these waves were coming and breaking, and then we got caught by this monster, and we almost got pitch poled, which is when the boat nosedives and the stern literally 180-degree flips. But right at the last minute, instead of pitch poling, it just rolled over upside down.
Like a bad capsize, it could have gone end over end. And if that had happened, we would have been, I think, not coming home.
He was on the back deck, I was in the cabin, and it was a really scary moment to get his feet stuck in the foot plates. So he was upside down in the water.
You have that panic because you feel ropes and stuff all over you, and I instantly thought I was tangled. So I'm reefing my feet out, so I got my feet out, spun around, and got up for a breath.
I'm in the cabin, I can't open the door. All I can see is his legs kicking in the water.
Then the boat wouldn't right itself, and I had to make a decision to unclip myself from the boat. Now that's the biggest no-no you can do out here.
And that was a really dodgy time, because when those waves come in, if you're separated from the boat by even half a metre, you're gone. You'll never catch up with the boat again.
But I had to unclip myself from the boat in order to shimmy down the boat's line, to clip myself back onto the back and help the boat spin back around, come up the right way.
I could get out of the cabin, helped him back onto deck. But then the question was, what are we going to do now?
It was a gnarly little situation to be in. And I've been avalanched before, and I've fallen in crevasses before, and I do base jumping, and that was a gnarly moment.
Something my wife said to me, she said, I don't care if you have to make 7 or 10 attempts to cross the Tasman to finish off this expedition. The important thing is you come home from every single one. You make the good decisions to come home every single time. And just based on that, and based on the factor that for the rest of the 40 or 50 days of this crossing, we would be getting bigger, stronger, heavier seas than what we'd faced on day 3. We're going to be going upside down a lot, and I just didn't think that we could take that risk.
No matter how much you want it, it's a game of risk. But yeah, at the end of the day, you have to come home from this stuff. If you don't come home, what a bloody waste. If all goes well, we'll be home in a few days, back to mainland Australia. And we'll have the ability to refocus and either try again or rethink the whole project or just take some time off, whatever, but you have that choice. If you make the wrong choice out here, you lose everything.
That's just astonishing. Grant, I've got to ask, and you're going to get asked this 100 times. You've always said, I don't care if it takes 7, 8, 9, 10 times as long as you get back. Are you going for the 4th?
What I look at is the fact that this is not just a crossing of the Tasman. I've travelled 165 days by human power from Singapore for now 13,000 kilometres to get to the east coast of Australia, and this is just the last bit to get across the Tasman to reach New Zealand. The other two things I look at are, do I have the belief that I can cross the Tasman, and do I want to do it? And 100% I do. The power of having such a massive goal to keep you motivated, to keep you passionate, it's an incredibly powerful thing.
What I like about this, Grant, is I don't see these stories finishing.
Yeah, well, they finish, I guess, when your life finishes, because for me, this is my life. It's not something that I do for a holiday or for a jaunt. It's what drives me. It's what inspires me. It's just so incredible to find something in your life that motivates you in this fashion and gives you so much. It's not about the instant gratification, you know. Sure, I've failed 3 times this year on the Tasman, but it's about working towards something which is incredibly difficult to achieve. It's about dealing with all the naysayers. It's about dealing with setbacks. It's about, you know, being tipped upside down in a storm and facing your worst fears and still getting up again and having another crack.
I'm going to be on the beach when you finally land, whenever that may be. Next year, the year after that. Astonishing story. I love the way it continues. Grant Rawlinson, thank you very much for your time. You're a bloody star, Captain X. Thanks for yours.
Thanks, Darcy. I can understand how people would think that it could be time to give up this expedition. But if I'd left Singapore, gone all the way to Darwin with Charlie, cycled across Australia and then got on the boat and rowed straight across to New Zealand, it would have been one hell of an adventure. But reaching the east coast of Australia and suddenly hitting this barrier of the Tasman, it's defined what the expedition was all about. It's not about instant gratification. If you don't get what you want on your first try, you give up and look for something else. It's about finding a purpose in life. And when I got to that point, I definitely realized what a privilege it is to have this challenge in my life to be able to take on. Because finding your purpose and following it, you know, it's an inner sense of peace. Purpose is that internal, intrinsic feeling, that sense of satisfaction, that sense of calm, when you know you're doing something in life that you're absolutely meant to do.
Tahi nepi nepi o